the Phillips collection just acquired 15 more of my works. So the Phillips is now the largest holder of any museum. They have 22 of my works. And I want to do a shout out to the woman who gave them those 15 works. She's not alive anymore. Her name was Dorothy Tapper Goldman, who was the largest collector of constitutions in America and sold her collection and has done amazing things with that. And I'm so moved that now a major museum has 22 of my works. So with that, I will start with a show that I did out of love at the Eldridge Street Museum, and I had no idea that it would have legs the way it has. Thousands of people have gotten to see the show online. In fact, I just told Shirel and Ari, I've never had this before, but one of their posts got 23,000 people that saw it. I know for any musician or actor, that's nothing, but for a fine artist, that's exceptional. So I'm excited to walk you through the exhibition. I picked some of my favorite pieces in the show. There are 48 pieces in the collection. There are now 47 because I have a show opening at the museum. I'm in a group show in Frankfurt, and they took one of the 48 pieces out, and it's now traveling. As an artist, one of the funnest things to see is when you see a museum show and there's a little plaque and it shows a picture of the piece and it says, "This is now not here." So I told them at the museum, you have to do me this favor. You have to do this. And they said, of course we're doing that. It's in the catalog. You have to do that. But so that's really been fun for me that I have one piece that was in one museum show for 4 months and now going for 4 months in another museum. So I picked these works to really span what I think the exhibition is about, which is memory and inheritance. So let's start with the first image. And I want to thank my amazing wife, Nessa Rappaport, who names every art piece of mine and names every exhibition of mine. Why did I pick memory and inheritance? Because the Eldridge Street Museum is one of the most beautiful old synagogues in New York, and that is the inheritance of our faith. And memory was all different things that connected with inheritance and memory. So here we go. So the first piece I'm showing you is a piece that was very important for me to have in the exhibition because, so I don't know if you all know this, but very often museums, and I think Sherelle, you and I once talked about something like that. Museums ask artists to look at things in their collection and respond to it. And they asked 9 artists, the Jewish Museum asked 9 artists to look at early illuminated manuscripts and do paintings based on those early illuminated manuscripts. Most of the artists in there decided to use words in their work, and I didn't want to, but then I decided I should somehow put some letters in there. And if you see, it's very abstracted, but it says Latov, right? Sherelle, go to the left side. You can see the bet is quite large. The green on the. Do you see that, Sherelle? The 3 green letters, they're very abstracted. Well, you know what's in a funny way, it's good that you don't. There it is. That's it. Those letters there. But I'm happy you couldn't find it right away because I didn't want to. But the curator kept telling me, Toby, I mean, we wanted you to have some letters and words in there. And I said, fine. So why did I pick this? It's based on an Italian early manuscript. And when I looked at it, I loved the way the gold was in the background and it looked almost like parchment or skin. And so I picked that yellowish color to look like a hide and then these are like letters that are Jewish colors, Techelet and Argaman, which is blue, and alizarin crimson or red. And then I wanted the background to be this parchmenty color and that green. And it's very much about joyousness. And this was from a illuminated manuscript that was done based on weddings. So I wanted there to be a lot of joy. I wanted the colors to move around and I wanted to feel like it was floating. So that's one of the paintings in the exhibition. So let's go to the next one.
I'm just interrupting for those of you who don't know Hebrew. Letov means for good or to.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize. Because I took a word from inside the manuscript that was about goodness. So thank you. Sherelle, you always add a lot.
And another question about the size of this work.
So always ask questions. So this piece is a smaller piece. It's only like 14 by 20. But I very often when I do a piece like this, there's a much larger piece in this. So all the paintings I do and all the sculptures are based on photographs that I take. And then I use that as a starting point, and then I go from there. So you'll very often see a paper piece of mine that becomes a small painting, and then it can become an 8-foot or a 12-foot painting. So
And there's another question about the play with negative space. I mean, you might want to keep that for a future painting, but I think it's a good question to ask.
What about the negative space?
Your choices between the negative and positive spaces.
So in my mind, they kept telling me to care about the letters and the designs that were on there, and I was more interested in the way the abstraction looked on the page. So I wanted the background to be like the parchment and all the colors to be floating on there. I don't usually paint like this. This to me is much more Eastern. It's not about foreground, middle ground, and background. And thank you for asking that. Usually I have a horizon line or something that depicts the image clearer. This to me was about abstracting the piece. Thank you for asking.
And last question about this piece, which again, you might want to keep for other pieces, is about the name. I know
Nessa makes them all up. They're based on Hebrew. And Sherelle, do me a favor, don't give away what they are. If you know Hebrew well, you can guess what they are. But I like that they're not real names. But Nessa makes them all up, and they're almost all used to be based on Latin, sometimes in French, but now they're more and more in Hebrew. All right. So this was a fun project, and this was a project I was given, and I love the story behind it. And the person who commissioned me was somebody on the West Coast. They had called me up and said, you know, we love your Omer counter. I've shown my Omer counter in the past. I don't know if I'm showing it today, but it's a very well-known piece that I've done that are in many museum collections. And the collector called me up and said, you know, we want you to make us a new ceremonial object. I said, well, what do you want? And they said, well, this is the first museum show it's been shown in. When I do a project like this, it was commissioned by an LA collector, but I always do different variations of it. So there's 7 of these. Usually when I make a new ceremonial object, I do quite a few variations. So they had said to me, you know, we want a ceremonial object. And I said, well, what are you interested in? They said, well, you're the artist, you decide what. And I said, well, do you want a Hanukkah, a menorah? And they said, no, we have too many of those. And I give a few ideas, and then I say, all right, tell me what you love. And I said, wait a minute, do you have a ram's horn for Rosh Hashanah? And they said, yes. I said, do you like it? And they said, yes. And I said, where do you keep the ram's horn, the shofar? And they said, we keep it in a bag. And I said, well, I'm making you a ceremonial object that you don't keep it in a bag. I find that very depressing. I'm going to make you something that the ram's horn sits on something powerful and beautiful. And this is my favorite part of the conversation. And then they said to me, well, can you make it look a little like the Omer counter? And I burst out laughing. And I said, wait a minute, you just told me you didn't want one. And you said there's so many. And at that time in 2004, there were only like 15 of them. Now there are 29 in the world. And I said, fine. And then I thought to myself, the binding of Isaac was always sad for me. I mean, I love that Isaac wasn't sacrificed, but I felt so bad for that poor ram that just was coming by, and that ram gets sacrificed. And now we use a shofar, which is, you know, the holiest thing for Rosh Hashanah, all the notes. Why not give it a beautiful space to sit on, but also allude to the tops of buildings? If you know the early paintings of Marc Chagall that I do love. He's not my favorite artist, but I love his early work. And when he does those towns, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it, Vitebsk or Sherelle, do you know how that's pronounced? With the town that he came from. And he did these beautiful paintings of tops of buildings. And I thought, if the shofar is going to be built from, you know, everywhere, why not have it on the tops of buildings? Also, reminiscent of an altar. And so I've done 7 versions of this with all different shofars. This is mine. This is my shofar, and each one should relate to the idea of Kedusha. And then somebody asked me in the museum when I was there, well, you know, it's supposed to be covered before you do it. And I said, yes, I made a beautiful piece of material to cover it. And only when you sound the shofar, you take it out. But if I had it covered, you wouldn't see the piece. So that's why I'm having it shown like this. All right, let's go to the next. So this is a piece that I did in 1998. I wanted to show work from over 30 years because I've been making ceremonial objects for many years. And I've made many iterations of Rosh Hashanah apple and honey dishes. And I'm going to give away this name because it's so obvious. It's called Toka, and Shirel knows that it's from Tekiah, or it's relating to the sounds you make with a shofar. And I wanted to do something about, if you like the idea of Rosh Hashanah being a new beginning, I wanted to have a dancer's figure holding up the honey. The honey goes inside the top, and then there's a beautiful, I love Rodin, and you can see my hand. I don't know if you can see it. I wanted to have a Rodin hand holding up the place that is holding the apples, and that's a baby spoon in the shape of a cycladic piece of art that holds the spoon that you put from the honey from the top onto the apples on there. I'm very thrilled about showing this piece again. It's been shown in the 90s and the early 200s. It was in many museum shows. It hasn't been shown in over 15 years. And that eventually will become bronze. Right now, it's still the wooden model because I've never gotten around to doing them in bronze. And this is the way it would look in bronze with those patinas. Patinas are you use that on bronze. It's a chemical, and you heat it up in different ways, and you can get all 3 of these colors. That bronze, the reddish color, the yellowish color, and the greenish color. Let's go to the next. So I won't do an exhibition anymore that's about my work on a larger scale without showing at least one sky and water installation. The museum is not a large museum, so I had to find a sky and water installation of mine that was not that big. And so this is one piece. There are 9 panels, and each panel is, I think, 12 inches by 9 inches. And I have the horizon line all the same. And because it was in a synagogue, I wanted to relate to the color Techelet. I wanted you to think about the different bluenesses of them. What happened is, once I finished this for the exhibition, you plan an exhibition 2 years in advance. I've been working on this for a while. I'm now doing a whole series of blue and blue sky and water paintings. Why did I make the horizon line the same? Because I wanted you to feel, these are photographs I took in the same place. And if you think about somebody like Monet, who did the haystacks and the church that he did, and the clock tower, I wanted to see how different each of these pieces could look right next to each other. So these were all done in Israel. These are different places that there was water and sky in Israel, and to me, it's a very peaceful piece. I just did that in preparation for this exhibition in 2020. That's when we planned the show, and the show opened in 2023.
Toby, one question about these. Are they always installed in this formation, or do you play with the formation of them?
All right. So my first sky and water painting was done in 1987. It was a single piece. I had a show at the Albright Knox, the Neuberger Museum, and the Brower Museum. And each of those museums, I did very different iterations, sometimes very large and very small. This is a recent phenomenon, only in the last 10 years, where I make the horizon line all the same. And I do additions where there are 3. I just finished one beautiful one that's 33, and it covers a whole wall. So no, I change it. Right now, I'm obsessed with this 9. I don't know why. I wish I knew, but I've made 5 different versions of this in the last 4 years.
So you consider this to be one work?
Oh, it is one work. And I don't even own this anymore. This is one work. Yes. So I wanted to show in the exhibition that I don't only do smaller works or pieces that fit on a wall. This is the newest project I just finished in May. It's a meditative space in downtown Philadelphia. It was an amazing project to work on because I am using aluminum because it's on a corner downtown Philadelphia and the light comes from all different ways. And once they told me that I had 26 feet to work with for this overhang for the building, I decided to call up a friend of mine who's an installer, and I found out I can make it 25 feet. And we had this amazing machine that wiggled the piece in. It took a half a day to get first of all, the piece was made in New York. It had to be shipped, and this is fun to know about projects like this. It took me 2 years to complete, and it had to go on flatbed trucks from New York to Philadelphia, and there are laws of when you can move huge flatbed trucks downtown Philadelphia. So it left New York on the night before, and I had to rent a place for it to sleep. And it had to get to the site by 5 a.m. It was one of the most exhilarating projects I've ever done. There were 2 film crews there, and it was I was scared out of my wits. And look how close it is to the ceiling over there. You can see on the one all the way on the left, there's a foot in between. And remember that it needs footing right there. You can see it's very little space. But each one looks very different from every angle, and it's on the corner. So from one angle, when you walk there, it looks like one sculpture, and then you see the front is 3, and from the other side of the building, it looks like 2. And yes, I am very aware I borrow heavily from Stonehenge and early Cycladic art. I worked with an engineer that we did the lighting, that when the lighting hits it, you can even just see I wanted you to see 2 very different ways they look in the light. And on the left side, it's at 5:30 in the morning when the light was just coming on, and the late one is, and the one on the right is in the evening. And I have special lighting that is from below and above, and it really feels like it's floating. So I feel when I make a sculpture, I want it to change drastically during the 24 hours of the day. So that was the newest project I've done.
Toby, can you say a word or two about the inspiration for these shapes?
So I talked to the then president of the hospital, and I said, what do you want this to do? And they said, when you come to a hospital, you're very tense and you're very nervous, and you're usually going there for a procedure, and there are millions of people that go there a year. I wanted to give you a feeling of harmony or lack of fear, but I wanted to feel monumental. So as soon as they told me those things, I immediately thought of Stonehenge, and I thought of the way those big pillars change and vary. But I also realized that I went there, and by the way, anytime I do a site-specific work, I go there a few times before I actually do the piece. When I went there in the beginning, the building wasn't built yet, but I looked at the way the light came all the different times of the day, and I noticed that there were many smaller buildings around there, and the light came and it varied a lot. So I knew that I needed something that had many cuts and variations that would pick up the light in very different ways. I knew that I wanted there to be 3 individual pieces, because I feel in many faiths, including ours, the number 3 is a very important thing. I wanted each of the shapes to feel like they were their own pieces, but I wanted the center piece to be the largest, and the one that was, you could see the negative spaces around there. So it was very important that it was very often I do organic pieces. I wanted this to be very geometric. I can't hear you, Sherelle.
Yeah, sorry. There's a question about how, like, were these shapes created? You said in New York, are they welded? Is there a factory that does them for you?
So, all right. So very good question. Everything I do, I always do a 12-inch model in carved wood beforehand. Then I made 7 different versions of this. Then I had a committee coming and look at it, and we picked on 3. And then I did one that was 6 foot tall in carved wood as well. And then I worked with a fabricator, and I had a huge space that the fabricator had, and they were built in there. And I would go by, and he copied everything exactly the way the 1 foot and the 6 foot were, and then it was welded from the inside.
Okay.
Wow, so this is very interesting. This is, I don't know why this one is this one here, because it's a different version of the same piece that's in the exhibition, but this works just as well. The one in the exhibition has a gold sky, but here's a perfect example that I do different versions of the same piece. So this piece is a very important piece for me because I've always loved looking at the Sistine Chapel. But when Michelangelo did God and Man, it didn't work for me that God was an old man and that Adam was a bodybuilder. But I love the way the 2 fingers almost connect. So I went to Costa Rica, and the bottom white area is a waterfall, and this is really based on a photograph, and there's so many iterations of this. I don't know why. I guess Sharon didn't put this one in instead of the other one. Maybe this was what we thought would be in there, but there's another one, and they all have this sky. The one that's in the show has a moon, a little moon in the top, but I wanted it to be like heaven and water almost connecting like fingers. Do you see that? There's a beautiful tension between the water and the sky. You're right there. And to me, this is a shout out to creation of the world. And it's also based on my sky and water paintings that I wanted the sky and the water to almost be touching. But it was important that this was a waterfall, and the green there were tons of trees around there, and I made it into one massive area, but it looked so much to me like that God finger and man touching. I also laughed. Somebody said to me, "Did you like E.T.?" And I said, I loved E.T. because when E.T. is about to touch, I think that's such a beautiful, sacred piece. So I wanted this in the exhibition. So since we're about to come up to Sukkot, I wanted to have one of my Etrog holders in the exhibition. And for my bar mitzvah, I got a silver Etrog box, but it was in the shape of an Etrog. And when I had children, and I walked with my children to shul, and I would hold both their hands, there was no way I could hold my Etrog holder. So over the years, in fact, I have one here. I'm going to show you something, and this will be fun. This is another iteration. I don't know if you can, Shirelle, can you do that? Can you stop it for a minute and show them? I want them to see how I carried it to shul. So can you see me and
Yes.
take a look at
And
this?
Toby, I'll just also mention that we had a program about the Etrog with Sharon Keller yesterday, and she also showed this Etrog box.
Oh, I'm so happy. Well, this is the Etrog box that's mine, and it's going home on Tuesday. And it fits. Look at this. I can carry it under my hand, and I then could hold now my kids are grown up. I'm about to have my, please God, first grandchild, and I can't wait. But you can see the way you can hold this like that. So all the Etrog boxes I make can fit under your arm. So I think that was I did that. I did that because it always bothered me that, the Etrog boxes that they're beautiful, but they're not, you can't carry them and do anything else. So I made this first one in 92. I've done many. In fact, I'm very proud that they're in a lot of museum collections as well. Oh, I'll show you something else. Wait a minute. This will be fun since we're here. This is my lulav holder. So it bothered me always that lulavs, and this is very based on Stonehenge. So the lulav goes right inside there, and this you can carry to synagogue too. In fact, I'm going to show you exactly how I can carry them, and you'll see they fit. I made everything that fits very. See, this goes here. This can go like here, and then I can still hold the kids' hands. So these are over 30 years old. So I'm excited to show you something on it. So these two go together.
Toby,
Sherelle, thanks for doing that.
just a question about the Etrog box that does look a little bit like a shape of a sarcophag. I don't know if
Yes.
that was something you had in mind.
I did. Tell them a little about that. That's fascinating that you brought that up.
What, like, in what way, like, did you have that in mind? Because as far as I know, it's like to keep bones, a sarcophag.
So to me, it's about holiness. And from what I understood, there was sacred bones, if I was what I remember.
Depending on the culture, I don't know enough about it. Depending
To me, this to me was about jewels or important pieces, and this is the only one that I made. This is mine that it has on it. It opens on a hinge. All the other ones I didn't do the hinge anymore because I don't like the. I mean, this I did is my first one. Later iterations, it doesn't have hinges anymore because when you leave it open, I don't like the way it looks. So now the pieces come off, and then you can see the beautiful etrog in there without having any distractions. But yes, I do look at other cultures intensely. All right, let's go to the next. So this is a Rosh Chodesh plaque. I've made many of these over the years too. I'm working on a new one now. And when I was studying in Israel, I remember there was a beautiful dance that I studied with Rav Amital, and there was a beautiful dance for Birchat HaChodesh, for the blessing for the new month. And then also when you said Kiddush Lavana, you make a blessing for seeing the sun. And I felt it was a very tribal, meaningful dance. And I wanted to have the figure as a non-gendered figure. So it could be a man or a woman dancing with the moon. And you can see there are 3 different moon shapes. And I wanted it to feel like you're inside of a cave. This is one of the very few pieces that I didn't take a photograph of. It was so embedded in my mind. Almost everything, like even the Etrog box, that's based on, when I was younger, I worked in Israel collecting etrogim, and I took hundreds of photographs during that experience. So almost all the pictures I have of the etrogs hanging, the fruit looks much bigger than the bark, and that was important to me. But this was really just a memory of dancing, and I felt like you were almost in a cave, and the moon and the body and the surroundings were all white. This is one of my favorite pieces I've done of ceremony. I mean, yeah, let's go to the next. So this is a series of, over the last many years, I've made many versions of candlesticks. And I have to thank the people that commissioned me, because people always say to me, can you do this? Can you do that? Would you do this? And it gives me great ideas. So the 2 women you can see on the side, the green, that's bronze, those 2 women. I got that. A collector of mine said to me, the women in his family are so important. He wants the Shabbat candles to be in the shape of women. I didn't want to be too exacting, so I wanted them to feel, very, it's very much of a shape of a woman's body, but it flares out in the bottom also because I wanted it to be able to stand and not fall over. And then the next one, the big blue one, That was a commission, I think, maybe 16 years ago. And somebody was very involved with the Olympics. And they said to me, we would like to have Shabbat candles that feel very much like a torch, that this is a torch that we could see every Shabbat and that it would feel like it always continued. I also wanted to have the first letter of God, which is a shin, which is Shaddai. And if you notice, the two blues and the middle become in the shape of a shin. So that was another version I did of candlesticks. Then the red ones were, this was the most interesting commission I got from somebody who said, listen, my family has many different people. They're Ashkenazi, they're Sephardi, they're Jews of choice. They're people that are intermarried, but everyone loves Shabbat. I want you to make a series for me that I can give to different wings of my family, but I don't want an ayin hara, like a bad luck. Ayin hara, is that a good way to say it, Sharia? Sure. Ayin against the evil spirit. That's what it is. So I want you to use a reddish color. And I said, I love red. I have no problem with that. And he wanted it to feel very much like a Rubik's Cube. You know, all these things are moving parts. So you can see it's made up of many, many different little pieces of wood that are becoming one piece, and that it looks the same all the way around. Not the same because they're different pieces, but it's not a front and a back, that it goes all the way around. And the final piece is the smaller piece, which is based on flowers. And I did an edition of 7. They're all over in the world. I don't own any. I own one that it's my wife's. And that's what's in the show because I don't have these anymore. But that was, again, relating a lot to the Chanukiah that I made. That's in the shape of a flower and the inside of a flower. I use the number 3 for legs very often because there's the world stands on 3 things: Torah, Avodah, Gemilat Chasadim. So I use that a lot. Torah is text, Avodah is worship, and Gemilat Chasadim are good deeds. So if I ever have a chance to throw in the 3, I do that a lot. So I worked with a wonderful curator for this show, and we were trying to put in something that was more obviously realistic. And these are a series called Dreaming of Sinai. I've done 3 different versions of 3. And I think a lot about what was Sinai. Did it really happen? And if it did happen, how did everybody get there? There's a beautiful Midrash story that there was really not one mountain, there were 2. And there's some Midrashim that talk about the fact that each tribe went with their own tribe. And I wanted to do it in a way that you felt like you're entering something. Sometimes you go in 2 of these, you go straight to the mountain. And in one of these, there's another stop where you become a whole community. This was a really exciting project. I did this 23 years ago. It was originally supposed to be very large paintings for a synagogue, but they decided to do something else. These each would have been 8 feet tall by 4 feet wide, but these are quite small. But it was exciting for me to show it in a synagogue. And the colors, again, I think are very Jewish colors.
Tobi, can you say something about how you work with the acrylic on wood to arrive at this very unique texture?
So my larger paintings are all on canvas stretched over wood. The smaller ones, I work I put a lot of paint on the surface. And when I used to do it in acrylic paints, I always, with acrylic on canvas, I always worried that they would crack. So all of these are done on birch plywood, which is a very, very great dense plywood. It has 7, it's plywood with 7 layers, and they're very tight, so you don't have any openings. And then I have an armature behind there made out of poplar, so it has a little depth. So in fact, maybe I'll even, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get up and bring you one and you'll see it. good news about being in the studio. I'll show you one. Here you go. So all my work is signed and dated on the back. This is made out of poplar, and this is birch plywood. There are many layers of gesso that go on the top. So by the time I get it, after my assistant finishes putting on the gesso, it's sanded down. It's as smooth as a baby's behind. You know what I mean? It's really smooth. And then there are many layers of something called modeling paste, or there are different versions of getting up a texture. Then there's opaque paint, which means you can't see through it. I mix all my own paints. And then the last 20 layers are staining, glazing. So when you see, oh, this is kind of good, you can see it, you can see the texture. So, and this, people always think I carved into this. This is not wood. This is all paint. It's totally smooth. And you can see the texture on there.
So the texture starts with the modeling.
Modeling paste and something, and then all the paint, I use a great thing. If anyone's an acrylic painter, I highly suggest GAC 100. It's like using oil. It's using, instead of using linseed oil, it's acrylic. You know, the difference in acrylic paint and oil paint. When I was young, I did oil painting, but then it was very bad for my skin because at that time I was using turpentine, which was very bad for anybody, including my hands. And then through Susan Rothenberg, I learned about something called flash. And then I eventually got to Golden's acrylic paints, and Utrecht has a very good paint too. And then maybe 15 years ago, somebody told me about GAC 100, which you mix into your paint, and it gives it the same thing that linseed oil does for oil paint. So I'm in total control of the surfaces of my work. I can, I have to be honest, I can make any color I want because I do all my own mixtures. I studied color theory for many, many years. So that's what gives it all the color. That has nothing to do with the wood, even though people think it's carved into it. I never touch the wood surface. All right, we can go to the next. So in the exhibition, I wanted to have a lot of nature. I've been interested in the environment even before Al Gore ran for vice president. I've always cared a lot that we don't care for the environment enough. And as an observant Jew, I always say we were given permission to be on this planet, but we are the caregivers of this planet, not the owners of this planet. So I wanted some images in the exhibition to be about nature. And this is the inside of a parrot tulip. This is almost exactly what it looks like. You know, people say, does it look like this? And I say, yes, when a parrot tulip opens all the way, you see that beautiful color inside. And I wanted this to be, and it's hanging next to another flower painting that's of, so these are the show is on 2 floors. And on the ground floor, there's a place for the, when you come into the show, you'll see a Seder plate, and then you see one wall of large installation photographs, and then 2 walls of paintings and sculptures on either side, with 3 vitrines on the ground floor, and then 3 vitrines upstairs. No, 2 vitrines upstairs. And this is the second to last painting in the show. And this is right next to a Chanukiah that's based on a tulip as well. And I wanted you to understand that when you look at nature, a tulip is only look this gorgeous for a day or two and then it dies. But I showed another image of the outside of a lily, and there the outside shape is so beautiful, and that's there for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then it opens. So I wanted to talk about that beauty can be about fragility as well. So this is about the highlight of how a flower looks in its most lush stage. So this is the newest baby naming chair I've made. I've made many baby namings over the years. And I wanted to do a new baby naming chair that was not about boy or girl. So when Ness and I had our children, I made a Kiseh Shel Eliyahu for our son, and I did a series of baby naming chairs for our daughters. And over the years, I felt I don't want that separation anymore. I want one chair that's made for all children. And if you look at this, and yes, I have been influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright and Renee McIntosh. I love them both. But I wanted the legs of the chair, if you look at it, the legs on the chair are smaller in the back than in the front. And I believe that the child can then take his or her or their own past and bring it into the present. This, I'm now working with a fabricator. So in other words, I made the design for this, but now I'm praying. I would like these to be in many synagogues and community centers all over the place.
So that's a good segue for me to ask, because this is true also for the previous ceremonial objects that you showed us. They can be mass produced. So
very few.
Have you considered that?
Yes. So I've considered and unconsidered it. This will be the first project I'm doing. I'm not going to mass produce it, God. I'm not doing that. But I would go up to 72. I always do things in relationship to Chai, but I'm ready to have this chair be done quite a few times. Most of my objects, I don't want to be more than 7. I sometimes do 18, like I did for 9/11. I'm not a mass producer, and I'm not interested in that. Maybe one day I will, but my heart doesn't go into it, because I don't want to. I'm a control freak. I know that I can do it better than, so when I did this chair, I worked with somebody. We had planned in the future to do more of these, but I brought them the exact model. I brought them the drawing. And then the painting in the background is totally me, and that flips into the back. It's a hard decision. I'm not against people who do it. I just don't know if I want to be that guy doing it. I like the physicality. Thank God I work 6 days a week, and I have more ideas than I possibly could do. I did some prints years ago, and it never was interesting for me, because you lose a lot of control. And I guess when I make art, I love that control.
And can you say a few words about the painting here? So
the painting was, I thought, for my son, for our son's chair, and for our daughter's chairs, I did. So our son, I did a pathway, and for our daughters, I did images based on the qualities of the imaot, of different qualities that our foremothers had. I wanted this to be, again, about nature. This is the inside of an orchid. And I liked it because it stems out, and it's so much about continuity in life. And when I was in Costa Rica, I noticed for the first time that many orchids grow naturally. And I love that. And I think children should be able to grow naturally. So I knew I wanted it to be an image of a flower. That was a decision I made it because I didn't want it to be more male or more female. And I settled on the orchid, and I settled on the way it opens in that beautiful, beautiful way. On the back of the chair is all gold. And the back of the chair, anyone who uses the chair, that baby's name I want inscribed in the back. So this was exciting to do. In 1995, I never dreamt of having a show at the Eldridge Street Museum, but I was down at Eldridge Street because there were people going there to clean up. It was a mess in those years. And this was a photograph I took of some of the opening, the windows were gone. And I did this chamsa. This is to keep away. I've done many versions of chamsas. This I did based on the Eldridge Street Museum, never thinking I'd have a show there. And it was exciting for me to put it. That is hand carved. So until 9/11 happened, I used to travel a lot and lecture, and I would bring my little whittling case. You were allowed to use a knife on the plane. and I would whittle. So this is from the period that I was still whittling a lot. And this is made out of pine wood. Pine is a very soft wood. And I'd get, the pine not to be too thick. I'd get slabs of it and I would cut it out. And then I would, have so much fun with a little X-Acto knife and other little tools. So it was fun to put this piece in the show. So again, talking about nature, there's a beautiful book that talks about how trees talk to each other underground. And there's a communication between trees. And again, I thought about this is 2 trees in Central Park. It's real. If I walk you there, you'll go, oh my God, that is so funny. Because it's based on, and I wanted them to feel like they were dancing. I don't know if you see the tree on the right, a branch is coming up and it almost looks like a leg coming up. And I like that the 2 trees were like talking above ground and their roots were close to each other on the bottom. And the canopy, I do this very often with trees. I look at all the leaves together as in a monolithic shape. So you can't see the trees. It just looks like a very large canopy. And again, I thought this was important to have in the exhibition because we don't take care of our trees enough. I think, and I believe trees talk to each other. And I wanted to have, somebody said to me, were you thinking of Adam and Eve in Gan Eden? And I said, no, but I love that. So I like that idea. I was thinking about trees in Central Park talking to each other, but I like when people bring their own, and maybe they thought that because it was in a synagogue, but I do think about Adam and Eve, and I do think about Gan Eden, and so now in my mind it's part of that, but it really started in Central Park. So this is one of the earliest menorahs I've done, and this is this is bronze, and this is in a vitrine right next to the Parrot Tulip. And again, you'll see I broke it into sets of 3, height and bottom. And I wanted one side for oil and one side for candles. And I know that Hanukkah is only 8 days, but there's one for a shamash, to light it, and they come apart. With my sukkah that I made and other projects I've made, I wanted my menorah to be able to come apart and be used during the year, not as a menorah, and only come together once a year as a menorah. There's a beautiful lecture given by Rabbi Daniel Sperber many years ago, which I heard when I was very young, about the fact that some people couldn't afford a Shabbat Leuchter, it was called, a Shabbat light, and a menorah, and there was permission given to have a round menorah because it was used also for Shabbat. The idea of being able to use something for more than just 8 days a year to me is amazing. And the sukkah that I made, that's now at the JCC, comes apart and becomes a meditative space during most of the year.
Tobi, how does this come apart? Is it 3 sections that you can show us? Yes, please.
I'm going to show you something. This is so much fun that I'm in my studio. Are you ready? I'm going to show you a different iteration of it, and you'll see exactly how I do it. So, every artist works on different things. This is another version I'm about to do, but not as a Chanukiah, but as a candlestick. So these come, the one you saw are 3 going in the same direction. They are carved in wood, and then I have a screw going through them. And they come across as 3. And then for the menorah, there's a small bronze piece I put in the one I choose to be that. But this is how it was made.
So the 3 in the menorah are screwed together and you can unscrew them?
No, no, thank you for asking. In the models, they're screwed together. In here, they're bronze, so they are created as 3 sets of 3. They're just touching, but they're very heavy, so they look like they're connected, but it's only each pillar has 3 on it, 1 in the middle, center, and 2 on the sides. So these are, put your thing after the 3, you can see that that's just touching. Now move over right there. That's not connected. I carved it and cast it in bronze that it touches perfectly, but it's not.
Thank you.
I like having show and tell. I never can do this when I'm not in the galleries. This is kind of fun.
I like having show and tell too, and we even have some time for some questions.
I did that on purpose. I'm very happy. I really want to hear from you. I gave us 10 or 15 minutes to really just chat if you want to ask me anything.
Yes, there were already a few questions, and obviously everyone is welcome to put their questions in the chat. So one is about your influences. There was a question if Matisse is one of your influences, but in general.
Love Matisse. So I have 110 favorite artists. So on the top of that list is really Rothko. Right after Rothko, you're going to be all shocked to hear one of my underrated artists. Artists love him, but regular people don't know him. His name is Morandi. I think Morandi is one of the greatest artists in history. I feel like crying. I would love to own one. I don't have the money to own one, but it's one of the few pieces I covet. I would love to have one of his little bottle pieces. Oh my God. Another one is Arthur Dove, not that well known, but I think one of the greatest artists of any century. Giacometti. One of my best friends as a human being is somebody by the name of Jack Whitten. Jack Whitten and I taught together for 20 years every Wednesday, and we had lunch every month. I love Vija Selmans, Martin Perrier, as I said, Susan Rothenberg. There are so many artists. Oh, Forrest Bess. Love Forrest Bess. He's an outsider artist. Bill Traylor. I mean, there are so many. Joan Mitchell. I love. Oh, Agnes Martin. I mean, there's so many artists. I'm a collector. I have to be honest. I own a lot of other people's work. I love my own work. And in fact, I'll tell you a cute story. Until maybe 10 years ago, I only had in my home other artists' work because I decided I'm in my studio all day and I look at my own work all the time. I wanted other work in my home. Nessa, my wife, and I go to a major collector of mine because I had a show at the museum in Florida, and we come into their guest room and it's full of like 5 of my paintings, and their living room had product. They own over 30 of my works and it's all over the place. And Nessa, we go into the bedroom and Nessa says, I'm married to you. I mean, why don't we have any of your work at home? And I said, come on, Nessa, I don't want people coming into my home and seeing my work. And she goes, well, they don't come into our bedroom. Our bedroom is going to only have your work. So all of a sudden, I told these collectors of mine, boy, did you change my life. I happen to love waking up to all my work around the room. So I now do have my own work at home, but not as much. I have many other people too. But I think art is a language, and I love other people's language.
Thank you. So a few more questions. This show especially received a lot of attention and amazing reviews. And in the last few years, I mean, your career has been exploding. Do you think there's something behind that, or an explanation, or is it random, or is it luck? How do you explain this to yourself?
Well, first of all, I believe in God. So I always joke that because I try and do a lot of interfaith work and art and healing work, I think God's like looking down and saying, hey, kid, I'm not a kid anymore, but, have a little fun. So I'm saying that truth and jest. What I think is, I tell this to all my students, I teach at university, do whatever you do and do it as good as you possibly can. My career really took a huge, amazing things happened to me in my 30s. And when I had the Guggenheim show, I was so busy for the next 5 years. And then, I got married and had a family, and, I still showed, I've had over 70 solo museum shows, but now we have no children at home anymore. I'm in my studio 6 days a week. I'm back to being able to work as hard on my practice. I teach much less. I used to teach at School of Visual Arts 3 days a week. Now I do 1 day a week, and I'm not ever going to go back to more than that. and I go to the galleries because I think it keeps me fresh. I'm very lucky. I know how lucky I am. I can't believe in the last few months, 5 more museums just got my work. I know I'm lucky, but I feel I'm at the beginning of my next journey. This is the new chapter in my life. I just hope the world stays afloat. But
do you feel there's more openness nowadays to works that touch themes of spirituality and holiness?
yes, definitely, yes. I'm getting into shows because of that. I'm my daughter, who I'm very close to all my children. And I once said to her, I said, I'm not the right type of thing right now. I'm whatever. And she said, Dad, you have one great thing going for you. And I said, what is that? And she goes, you're over 70. I said, oh, really? So I think that might be a good thing for me. I do think there are people. I don't know if there was a review in the Times again today. There are a lot of people. The art speculating world is not the world I care about. I care about art that has true value, meaning that it's about having a conversation. I got this week, because of the Brooklyn Rail article, I had 7 phone calls from people who I never met before, who wanted to get my work because of that article. And I talked to 2 of them this morning, and I said to both of them, they said, we'd love to get your work. And I said, only if you're going to put it on your wall. If you're going to put it into storage, I'm so not interested. I'm the wrong guy for you. So I do think there are people that still look and collect art with their eyes. There are, unfortunately, many people that do it with their ears. There's a very different way of collecting when you're passionate about the work. And those are the people I'm looking. And by the way, those are all the artists I show. When I do the tours, I'm showing you artists who I think are really gifted. And, people say to me, I can't believe you love going to galleries and showing other people's work rather than your own. And I'm going like, what's wrong with that? I mean, like, are you kidding? If you're a baker, you want to try every other bakery shop to see what they taste like. And I believe artists learn from other artists. I always will tell you, this artist reminds me of that. And all through art history, artists were looking at other artists, and that's how they grow. So I feel I can't believe my life right now. I just pray it stays, and I pray the world doesn't go kerplunk. And I do want to say something which I almost never do politically, but I think what's happening in Israel now and the hatred of Jews is bad for the world. I'm not talking about whether I like Bibi Netanyahu, forget about him. I'm talking about the fact, do I think anyone is perfect? I don't think anyone is perfect. But Israel is not a pariah nation. And I think to look at a group of people like that is frightening. So I am a little concerned. And Sherelle, I want to say my heart is with every Israeli, whether in Israel or in New York or in anywhere. I think it's so unjust, the way the world is looking at Israel. And, I'm not talking about how Palestinians are treated. I'm sick about every child that's killed, but there are bombs going off in Tel Aviv and in Haifa, and that is, as I talk about nature, I'm very concerned about nature. I'm concerned about a world that has such animosity to a small country, that Jews live there forever. I'm not political, but that is something I think about a lot. And my new work has a lot to do with that. I'm doing a lot of images. I did a whole series now that I've only showed one in a museum show on October 7th. And it was a very powerful project to work on for myself. I debated whether I'd show any of them, and I did decide to put one of them in a museum show. I think,
So I'm going to interject, since we have you in your studio and you just mentioned the works that you're working on. Is there a chance that you show us something that you're working on right now?
I'll show you one. It's about to go to a museum, another museum. I'll show it to you.
If we already get you in your studio, we might as well enjoy it and see stuff that the world hasn't seen yet. Oh, I sent him far away this time.
have to say some of them are very difficult to look at. I'm picking you one that isn't, I think, as difficult to look at. But the colors, I don't want to say too much about it, but I think it's, as they say in Hebrew, muvan me'alav, you know, what it is. I mean, Shirel, you're an artist. Do you have any idea what I'm playing with or thinking about?
It looks to me like a body kind of dismantled.
So that's it. No, I didn't want to say it, so thank you. That is
Ah,
what it
and
is.
we have here, and Kenneth is saying Jonah, which I love as an association of Jonah and the whale. I
Right.
didn't think of it, but I think that's a beautiful
Right,
association.
that is. So I did a series. One is so difficult to show, and I don't think I'll show it for many years. It's all red, and it's horrible to look at. But there's 7 works, and some of them become very large. This is the size. It's already signed. It's brand new. I just finished it now. And if you look at the surface, you'll see it's a very sharp surface. It's you know, I think about this a lot. Sometimes I do art for 20
Toby,
years.
maybe sit down so we can see you because we're not seeing your face.
Oh, I'm sorry. I sometimes make art for 20 years from now. When I did the pieces for 9/11, I didn't show that for 10 years, and then I did a whole museum show just based on that. I think it's very important to do the work. I'm not always as sure how early I should start showing the work. You know what I mean? That's but I started doing it on October 7th, and the first pieces were hard. I mean, I can't even look at them, and I was working on them. You know, it was a very painful process, but I did it more for therapy for myself. But I think you have to confront, you know, what happens in life. I don't know how to say it in a better way. I mean, I think about Guernica, that Picasso did that so quickly. I can't believe anybody could do that. But I think, and I love Goya. I mean, Goya is a huge influence on me. But he's an artist who I think is so underrated. I mean, people know him historically, but I think when this happened on October 7th, all I thought about was Goya. And I thought, you know, I think it's very important to have art that opens one's heart and soul. You know, that to me, that's what, by the way, if you'd say to me, what do I want to happen in my life? And the last sentence in the Brooklyn Rail article, I talk a lot about what I want my art to do. You know, I'm not political, but I want my work to bring you to a certain place.
Toby, thank you so much. I will mention again, for those of you who are fortunate enough to be in New York, you'll have the opportunity, if you'd like, to meet Toby on October 27th at the Eldridge Museum. I put the link in the chat again. You might have noticed just by seeing what Toby showed us that, and it's something I always say, don't imagine you've seen the art because you've seen it on the screen, because you never have the physical experience of the work and your body, the distance, your own interaction, the texture. So it's a beautiful opportunity to meet Toby and to see his work in person. So the link is in the chat now, and I will obviously include it along with many other links in the follow-up email for all of you. Toby, thank you so much. This was such a pleasure. It's the first time I think I'm hearing you talk about your own art in this way. And thank you for being so open and generous for all of us. So, toda rabba. Thank you.
This was, first of all, Shirel, because you're in Israel, my heart is so with you, and I'll be there in December lecturing. And one of the artists who you know I love is having a show at the Tel Aviv Museum. His name is Ariel HaKohen. He's now one of my closest friends, artists. First, he's one of my closest friends, but he happens to be an artist. And I think the piece he's doing is, we're very close. So I've been seeing it as it's growing. It's brilliant. I mean, brilliant. So I'm going to bring him back for a thing after he just won the Rappaport Prize. And I'm going to bring him back and do an interview with him. I talk to him every week. I mean, he's somebody I'm very close with, and I'm so impressed with the work he's doing. And then I'm happy. I love other artists, so I don't think, but I like talking about my own work as well. But not every conversation. I've always when I was very young, my professor, George McNeil, who I adored, who made me the artist that I am, always said to me, think about your own work, but realize you're not the only artist alive. And I really agree with him. It doesn't take away from me or Sherelle, who's an artist as well. If we talk about other artists, it's enough room in the group to have many, many voices. And the only thing I think that, and I won't show you an artist who doesn't have a unique voice. To me, the unique voice is what makes the artist great. You know, when you don't have that, then it's just decorative. And I think there's a huge difference. Anyway, thank you all. Thank you, Orange County. I'm feel very lucky to be a regular on the program.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We look forward to seeing you in our next sessions. Have a good day, afternoon, evening, or night, wherever you are.
Bye-bye.